Welcome everybody to Harvard Extension School's Creative Writing and Literature Student Club. I'm Carly-Rae, the president of the Creative Writing and Literature Student Club this semester, and this is Literary Hour where we chat all about the literary process. Today we have Root Literary agent Melanie Figueroa joining us, and according to Melanie's wish list, she is drawn to voice-driven general and commercial fiction with book club appeal, often with a touch of genre elements such as speculative, fantasy, horror, romance, mystery, and historical. Some of Melanie's best-known projects are Natalie Sue's I Hope This Finds You Well in adult fiction and Kate Sweeney's Catch the Light in children's fiction. So, welcome, Melanie. We are so excited to have you on Literary Hour. Tell us where you're joining us from.
Thank you. I am in San Diego County, California. So
Oh.
it is
And tell
not
us more.
sunny right now, though, as promised. So
You said it was chilly.
yes.
Well, tell us more about Root Literary Agency. You joined in 2018 and then got promoted to agent in 2019.
Yeah, Root Literary was founded in 2017 by my boss, Holly Root. And she was an agent for, I believe, like at least maybe 15 years prior to that, working at a few different agencies before she took off and founded her own. So for those first few years, it was just, her, me, my colleague Taylor Haggerty in a tiny office in downtown Los Angeles. So we're a very boutique agency, but I always call us a powerhouse. We have a lot of really commercial best-selling clients, award-winning clients, I'm sure, whose names would be familiar to you guys, like, Emily Henry, Victoria Schwab, just to name a few.
Yeah.
Small
Now,
but
Root
mighty.
Literary, yeah, you said like it has more of a boutique approach to representation compared to other agencies. Can you discuss a bit more about what that looks like with representation at Root Literary?
Yeah, we're really hands-on. Holly's big thing in her approach to working with clients is really being strategic about like their long-term career. And so we always say like, yes, I'm signing you usually for one specific project, but no matter what happens with that project, I want to work with a client, ideally, throughout the course of their career. And so we're always thinking about how to keep building, what's the most strategic next step. So a lot of that, yeah, hands-on approach comes from the client care.
hmm Now, the agency website features a submission page. Can you share more about the submission process at Root Literary?
Mhm. Do you mean for query?
Yes, like if somebody's going to query, can you query more than one agent?
Mhm.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, we always, I think we changed it a few years ago. So now our policy is to query one agent at a time. You're welcome, like if I passed on something, you would be welcome to query one of my colleagues. But it's honestly just to avoid like three of us loving the same submission and then having to fight internally for it, which is a good problem, of course, but it has happened before. So
Mhm.
it's just easier for us if you query one agent at a time. And also, I match make as much as I can internally. Like if I read something and I think this feels very much like what one of my colleagues has told me they're looking for, and I don't know if I quite have a vision, I always try to share. Um,
Mhm.
Obviously, that can be hard depending on the volume of submissions you're getting, but as much as possible, I do try to do so.
Mhm. Do you have like weekly meetings with the fellow agents and you discuss if there is a project you like or?
Yeah, well, some of them I've just been working with for years now, so I like know what feels. And I will always say there's like a Venn diagram for sort of our tastes and like the areas that we work on. So there are places where like a couple of my colleagues also might work on fantasy, but I know that their taste leans, maybe like more genre, or like maybe they can hang with like orcs in like a fantasy, whereas like I don't know that I would be the orc person at Root Literary. So I know like what their interests are. So yeah, part of it is just working with them for years, but we do have monthly team huddles, and then we kind of do more like casual weekly meetings too, where we might meet one-on-one. So
Now the agency website does feature also there's a submission page. Can you
mhm,
and then there's also a resource link page. So do you
mhm.
recommend writers go to the resource link before submitting a query?
I always think that like as an author who, probably wants to have a career in this, going to not just necessarily the links that we have on the resource page, but just like studying the industry, the market, your genre. Like I always tell people you should be a student of the genre that you're,
Mhm.
publishing into. So I think like and we also have a client resource portal. So after we sign people, we give them access to kind of like a password protected like website that has a bunch of articles we've written. And part of that is because we want our clients to be really like smart and savvy and to be informed so that they can make really like educated decisions about their
Mhm.
career. So yeah, big on resources for sure. And recommend just studying as much as you can.
Now, when you say studying in the genre, so say somebody wants to write in
Mhm.
rom-com, do you mean like looking at like author interviews, kind of seeing what they're saying about their works, the writing process?
Yeah, part of it could just be like watching what other authors are doing and whether that's, there's so many great like podcasts and like informational stuff like this out there. So I just recommend like listening to that kind of stuff. And then part of it is just like actually reading the books that are on the same shelf that your work would sit on. So, because sometimes people pivot, sometimes people start off thinking they want to write romance, and then maybe they realize later they want to write like horror or something. And for me, like sometimes I call myself genre agnostic because I read pretty broadly. And so it's more important that I have like a vision for something than me being like, oh, you must check this box or something. So I'm always fine with people making that pivot, but I do think you need to be a student of that genre. Like if you're trying to write a horror novel, but you've only read like one or two horror novels your whole life, right? I think you should be reading like books that have been out the last 3 to 5 years, read as much as you can because those are going to be your peers. So that's part of, yeah, being a student of the genre.
Yeah. Now, Root Literary doesn't accept screenplays currently. Last
Mhm,
semester we did have Jordan Hill from New Leaf come on, and they
mhm.
handle film rights to novels. Is that something your agency does, or how does that process work?
Yeah. So we work with co-agents. So we don't have an in-house film and TV person. However, our office is now, we're based in Burbank. So we have Gabrielle Greenstein, who I've been working with for a few years. She came to us from Gersh. So she came to us from the film and TV world. And her part of her job is to be a licensing agent, which I can discuss more later. And then part of it is kind of like film and TV liaison. So she like knows everybody. She's constantly going out, being in LA. I mean, there's film people on the East Coast too, of course, but part of being in LA, I think, helps us really network and have those relationships. So we find co-agents who specialize, in the same spaces that our authors do. There's a lot of matchmaking, and then those co-agents are the ones who would, and a lot of them work at places that you guys would probably be familiar with, the CAAs, of the world. So that's kind of how we handle that process.
Okay. Now you also use Query Manager. Does that make the
Mhm.
process easier for you when you are getting them?
We used to have a shared Gmail inbox and like a ton of like intense filters and like and like I think, with email, I feel like things can get buried and lost. And it's just I like Query Manager because it's nice to have like things be compartmentalized. Like, you go into this inbox for this purpose, and it's like very easy to focus on that task versus being in your inbox doing like emailing in an editor and then suddenly you're getting a bunch of queries and maybe that's not like the headspace that you're in right then. So I really like Query Manager. I think it's a really great like organizational tool for agents to keep on top of their queries. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, let's talk about your list and what you represent. Tell us more about the clients and kind of what you look for, what
Mhm.
genres you lean towards.
Yeah. Again, genre agnostic. So
I
I am
know.
open to, it's really just like, do I know who to sell this to? Do I have a vision? Do I understand like who the reader is? So there's a wide, like a broad umbrella there. However, I think most of what I work on has like a book club appeal. Like I like books, even if they are genre, that have something to say, that are like books that are about something. I have a like on the children's side, which I do some of, I go as young as middle grade. Like I have a book that came out a few years ago called Nura and the Immortal Palace, and it's middle grade portal fantasy. And it is a portal fantasy, but the book is also very much like the main character is a child, she's a child laborer, and it's very much about that and like living in poverty and like wanting wanting more for yourself. So I like books that even if they are entertaining and follow like a genre, like they do have something deeper, like a deeper thing to say. And then I also, a lot of my books have like the crossover into like women's fiction. And I think Natalie Sue's I Hope This Finds You Well is really good example of that. So book clubby stuff, no matter kind of what genre it's in. Yeah.
Did you always want to have a diverse portfolio when it came to like authors you represent? Like, did you want to not just focus on children's lit, but you wanted to have maybe a few different?
Yeah, actually, so when I became an agent, I didn't think I would work on kids' books. That was actually kind of a surprise to me. Holly represents a lot of middle grade and YA authors, and I was reading a lot of her stuff. And I sometimes I do joke that I'm like 12 years old inside, and I love like, these franchise like children's animated movies like How to Train Your Dragon, and like I love reading kids' books, but I didn't really think that that's what I'd be working on. So that was a little bit of a surprise to me. What I had been reading a lot of in my personal life was book club fiction, like Celeste Ng is a favorite, like I love Curtis Sittenfeld. So like that's kind of what I thought I would be working on. And moving forward, like I do want to be working on more book club fiction, but a lot of where you start as like a really like new agent is the kind of submissions that your agency is like getting and what the books that they're known for, right? So very eclectic taste. But yeah, I always knew that I wanted to work on a lot of different things. I think that's the fun thing about being an agent is, you know, you never get bored. Like there's always there's always something different to work on. So yeah, I love discovering new stories. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you do have a client that say submits in a rom-com and you love the book, sign it, and then a year from there she wants to write horror, how do you
Mhm.
navigate that? Like, does another agent from the agency represent a different genre, or is that why you have so many different genres, or you're not genre
Mhm.
centered?
Yeah. There are a few agents here that are like romance specialists. I don't claim to be one. I love a love story. I love a romantic subplot, but I'm not like a romance specialist the way like some of my colleagues are. So depending on where my client was going, it would be more of a situation of like consulting with people who, I work with. We're very collaborative here. So oftentimes like these editors are acquiring a variety of genres. They might like there are romance dedicated imprints, but there are also more generalist imprints where they might dabble in romance. And so these are people that I have relationships with regardless of, romance or not. So sometimes it's just consulting with colleagues on the market and making sure that I'm doing right by my client. And then in terms of pivoting, like I think that's more of a question of like when and what and all of that because it can be tricky to like I do have clients who tell me like they have a variety of genres that they would like to publish in, but you can't do everything at once, right? And so it's kind of like where to start. And that's a lot of the strategic like career planning and like where that comes into play.
Now, have you ever had a client that submits, say, historical fiction, you love it, you sign the client, and then they present to you like a rom-com book, and you're like, "Ooh, I love this. Maybe we should start here."
I don't think I've had that happen yet, but I'm sure it will. Yeah.
Well, you're currently open to queries, so tell us more, kind of what you look for. Like I mentioned in the intro, but kind of give us a deeper dive when you're looking at a query.
Yeah. For queries, when I'm going through them, like sometimes I'll just skip to the sample pages, honestly, without even reading the pitch, just because I want to know like how this person writes, like what their voice sounds like, and whether it grabs me just purely on like a line level, like the writing. And then if I'm liking what I'm reading, oftentimes I'll go back to the pitch. Not always, but sometimes I'll do that and go back to the pitch and be like, what am I in for? What is this? Like I like the writing. What's the story about? So voice is a big one, and that's, we always talk about like that's just you can't teach voice, you can definitely hone it and that's something you can develop over time. But I think voice is just something you can't teach, you can't really edit for it. So I look for like authentic dialogue. Like I wanna be reading a book where the conversations really feel authentic, and like feel like the way people really talk in real life. I always think like writers are probably like eavesdropping on conversations to get a sense of that cadence. So yeah, voice is a really big thing. And just I love authors who are really dedicated to their craft too. So yeah, that's kind of the main thing that I'm looking for. And then also just like again, like it doesn't have a hooky, like high concept sort of pitch. I do work on stuff that is a more literary leaning, but I think even then, like having a strong hook is the thing that's going to get an editor excited and help us find the right reader.
Mhm. So you're open, if we're going to put it classified as a genre, like you're not just looking for YA right now, like you're looking for, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I do. My list the last few years has been leaning more adult, but I have like a special place in my heart for middle grade. I'm just doing that a little bit more selective right now because the market for kid lit is a little bit tough right now. But I love YA. And, but yeah, but these days I've been a little bit more focused on adult fiction.
Yeah. Now you also ask for a synopsis. So can you share more about what you look for in a synopsis, maybe versus a query? Do you want the
Hmm.
spoilers in the synopsis, things like that?
Yes. Yeah. And that's actually like some of my colleagues read the synopsis before, and I think mine is like it's optional, but for some of my colleagues it's required. And a lot of them do actually read the synopsis before they even read the book. I'm like when I'm reading something that I requested, I try to be really pure about it and read it like the way that a reader would read it. So I actually don't read the synopsis before I read the manuscript. I go back to the synopsis if like the pacing is slowing down and the pages, or I've finished the book and I'm just curious like how they're kind of envisioning the plot versus the way it was actually executed. So I'll look at it more in reference once I'm further in the manuscript. But I do have colleagues who read it before, and I'm like, how do you like that spoils everything? Like I want to be surprised. I want to experience the book at least that very first read because I know if I sign this client, I'm going to reread it and edit it, and I'm going to have to be more critical when I go back in. So that first read, I really try to maintain like the pure experience that a reader would have.
Now, when you are reading the query and then you do decide to read the synopsis, the thing that grips you is still the voice, like in both, no matter what. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think
Um,
that's true for a lot of us. Like if you go into a bookstore and you like pick a book off the shelf and like you read that first page to be like, do I want to actually purchase this book and take it home? Like I do think a lot of us, whether you thought of it as like defined it as voice, like I do think that's the thing that grips you for that first page. Like I just
yeah,
like the way this person talks. I like the way that they write. And that's voice.
yeah. I know there's a lot of discussion on where to put the inciting incident. Like sometimes you want to put it on the first page, but voice is like
Mhm.
an important part, to make it stand
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is there one thing on a query or a synopsis that immediately makes you give it a pass? It just doesn't. Is it the voice still, or is there something like a common mistake or common like thread you see on queries?
I would say just something that is like obviously not for me.
Okay.
Like I'm not gonna be like if I see a lot of like ex-CIA agent and like government thriller, like that's not probably gonna be something I know what to do with. Like in my personal life, like I love thrillers, like I love like the Equalizer series and like in like film and TV, like I will watch that, but like I don't know that as in the book world as an agent that I would be the right person for that. So that would probably be like an automatic just set it aside. Otherwise I mean, I've requested things even where maybe the pitch wasn't quite as like hooky or strong because the writing was so good that like it made me want to give it a little bit of extra consideration because not everyone's strength is writing a pitch. And so maybe I'm like, well, maybe it's just the way that they describe the book and let me give it a read and see if like would I pitch it differently. So yeah, that would be the main thing.
Now, what about the length of a query? Like, in an elevator pitch, when you're looking at it, do you prefer a shorter query versus a longer one? I know
I
there's a lot of
prefer
articles
shorter.
online. Okay.
Yeah, I prefer shorter, but I think it's just because we get like decision fatigue. Like there's just,
Yeah.
if like I'm like I want the like, the hook. I want to know maybe a little bit about you. Um, you don't need to write like an essay. You already wrote a whole book, you know? So yeah, I prefer shorter.
Okay. Now there is a lot of discussion as well on comps. Do you prefer seeing like a recent comp, like a Colleen Hoover book or Harry Potter, or do you prefer the writer chooses like something that's not so best-selling? I know you like a lot of like book club picks, so would you like to
Yeah.
see that in a comp or?
I think I want to see a few that are from the last like 3 to 5 years, at least one, I don't mind an older comp if it's just like the perfect, like that is exactly what this is. But I get a little worried when people are like Harry Potter, like Hunger Games, because they're so, I mean, I love those books, but they're, like 20 years old at this point. And so it makes me wonder, like, have you been reading recent books? And the market does ebb and flow. I mean, there are classics, there are evergreen titles that people still read to this day, like Harry Potter and Hunger Games, but it just it makes me it's not like a red flag, but maybe like a yellow flag to just be like, are you familiar with books that are being published right now? Because it's a different market than it was when those books were released.
Yeah. Now another discussion that comes up, and you did mention it, is literary agents being editorial or not. You did mention when
Mhm.
you're reading, the editorial process that will go through. So how close do you work with authors, and can you like, are you an editorial agent?
Yeah. I never know like what the line is between being editorial and not, to be honest. Like I do edit my clients' books. I think when you're a really new agent, and this is actually sometimes the advantage of going with like a junior agent, quite frankly, is that they have a lot of time because their list is really small. And so when I had just started agenting, and you also kind of like have to like, prove yourself a little bit, and sometimes like I might do a couple rounds or 3 rounds on something of edits and get it there. But then as your list grows, your bandwidth shrinks, right? And so that's the tricky thing is like as your career grows, like maybe you just don't have the ability to spend a year editing something and going through, 3 or 4 rounds of revisions. So I think it's more common to do like one sort of bigger pass of edits if it's needed, and then maybe like just polish things up a little bit prior to getting it out of submission. So there is like a little bit of a, you know, spectrum of like what feels like it's ready for an agent. And I always advise for people to get it as far as you can on your own before, querying people. But I do think
Now,
I'm editorial. Like I
yeah.
will do follow-up calls with my clients and brainstorm, and I will look at like new ideas they have and kind of weigh in before they even start drafting so that they have that confidence that like I know what to do with something before they actually draft the entire manuscript. So if it's, as long as we can do some of that developmental work up front and then they go off and draft, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's editorial, helping them out. Yeah. Now, when a writer does send you their work, like, they're in the submission process, do you look for it being super polished? You did mention that if the pitch is a little weak, but you really like the writing, you'll still
Mhm.
accept it. What about if, you really like the voice, but there is some sort of editing that needs to be done, will you still like request that?
As long as I know what to do with it. Like there have been times where I've read something and I was like, this, like I really like this, but I know it needs something, and I don't know that I have the vision for how to get it there. And then there are other times where I read something and I'm like, maybe like the beginning is really strong, the ending is really strong, and maybe like the middle is like that saggy middle where the pacing slows down. And I feel like we need something else to like inject a bit of urgency or tension or something in the narrative. And I have ideas for how to do that. And so that might be that to me. And I know who to send it to. So to me, that's like, I'm going to call this author and talk through, whether they feel the same, whether we're aligned on the vision, whether they're like resonating with my ideas. So it's really more like those two manuscripts could need the exact amount, same amount of work, but like one of them is like, I don't think I know how to get it there. And the other one is like, I have a vision, right? And that's kind of where I know which one I'm going to go after.
Now, in the first 10 pages that you do request, we talked about you looking for voice. Do you look for conflict on the pages? Do you look for an inciting incident? Is there
Mhm.
something beyond voice, like in the writing, that makes you want to keep reading? Or is it just that thought, like, oh, I need one more page? So that kind of gives you the indication.
Yeah, I definitely need a conflict, but it can be more internal, you know what I mean? Like it can be like a good coming of age story. Like it doesn't have to be, because I work on more commercial fiction, but then again, like book club fiction does tend to be more character driven. So you do need tension and conflict, but it doesn't have to be like big fantasy, like end of the world stuff at stake, right? So like I mean I can hang with that too, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, is there any advice you can give to writers who are sending out queries? Like it is very selective, but is there something you recommend? Like, say you get 10 no's. Do you recommend a writer goes back, looks at their pitch, or do you recommend just, keep going through the trenches?
Querying is so hard. I've signed clients who have queried like way more than 10 agents and gotten a lot of passes. And um sometimes that's just indicative of like the client who is very open about this, so not speaking out of turn, talks about it on their social media platform, is like they're working in fantasy, which is there's a lot of fantasy books out there, and some of the concepts kind of feel familiar in that way. And so I think she had been getting a lot of feedback like that. And then I ended up signing her for that same book that she was getting passes on, and we sold it at auction, right? So like the tricky thing is like kind of taking those rejections as a reflection of like your work or your craft or your self-worth, even because there's a lot of vulnerability and like emotional stuff on the page too. And so I think trying not to read into things too much and like let it get to you. Like I don't even like calling like on our submission. Like I actually there's part of me that doesn't even like the term wish list, and I want to like call it something else, because I think that like people get in their head about, well, like she said she wants this and that, and that's like exactly what my book is. But as you guys just heard me talk about earlier, when we're talking about editorial stuff, like there's so much nuance here. And I think wish list can make querying feel like you're like going out and getting someone's shopping list or something, and it's just there's so much nuance. And the voices we're drawn to, the editors we have relationships with, like all of that is impacting like which clients I'm going after. So I think it's really easy to get in your head, and I think you just have to have conviction and like your writing and your craft and your stories. And there's a little bit of like just being tenacious, because it's tough out there. And I think sometimes people, again, can just get in their head. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, once you get a query you're excited about, how does the reaching out to the author part work? Do you do a partial request, a full request, and then, say you're reading it and like it? How does that process work?
I do. If I request something, I'm always looking for the full. I don't want to get it and then be like, oh, I love this. I want to keep going. And then be like, I have to wait for you to send me the rest. Just send it to me. And I don't finish every single book that I request, because sometimes I can tell, 50, 100 pages in, that like either something about the structure like needs more work or something, or maybe again, because I don't read the synopsis always, like maybe I'm like, oh, this went in a direction that like I wasn't expecting. And like I don't know that I am resonating with like that particular execution of this idea. But I always I always request the full. And then if I am feeling like I have that vision that I am sparking with this voice, that I know who to send it to, I'm scheduling a call.
Mhm. Now, how long does it usually take you to read a full submission when you get it?
There's kind of a spectrum there. I mean, I get a lot of queries, so I also get a lot of authors, giving me notice that they've had an offer of representation from another agent. And so inevitably, like kind of industry standard for that is usually like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, sometimes depending on what time of year it is, to consider that offer, to discuss, anything with other agents that you already have your book out with. and then decide ultimately who you want to be your agent. And so those books inevitably, like I have to prioritize them because there's a time sensitive deadline. But typically, I think I say that I get back to people on like queries within like 12 weeks at max, usually. Sometimes it's much sooner than that, depending on how much I'm in there, how much I'm like actively looking for something. And then in terms of fulls like that I've requested, I think honestly it's probably a similar timeline. Yeah, as far as like at max. Yeah. At least I try. Sometimes certain times of year, I'm like, I'm getting a lot of great stuff. So now I have a lot of stuff to read and it might take me a little bit longer. So it's a little bit seasonal like that too.
Yeah. Now, when you do like a full submission, do you set up a Zoom with the author? Is there like a vision process you work through? Take us
Mhm.
through that process.
I do Zooms, I do phone calls. I don't like staring at my face that much when I'm talking to people. But I do think a lot of people really like Zooms for at least the first time that you're talking to an agent because it's just nice to put like a face to the name and it feels like a little bit more like going to a coffee shop and like talking together. So like at least with that first meeting, I do a lot of Zooms and then we talk sometimes for an hour, sometimes longer, honestly, because it's a big decision and sometimes people have multiple offers and I want them to like get all those questions out, like get everything on the table, like talk to me about what they want their career to look like, the kind of ideas that they have for the future. I want them to like, just ask me all the questions so that they feel comfortable. If they want to go with me, that they feel like they were able to really get a sense of like what it would be like to work with me.
Now, for the submission process after you sign a new author, do you like have a list of like editors at houses that you're like, okay, I really think this would resonate with them? Does it take
Mhm.
a few months to like sharpen the pitch and then go on submission, or how do you work that process?
I always feel like if I don't have even just like a rough submission list in my head when I'm like before I decide to offer, I shouldn't be offering. Like if I don't know the imprints, the editors, again, even if I'm like I'm in between a couple people, like I'll finesse it, I'll finalize the sub list after I sign a client. But if I don't have like a rough idea of who I would send a book to, I'm not going to offer. um, because that just means I'm not the right agent for them. They should sign with someone who does know exactly where to send it to. And then in terms of pitch, I kind of like, honestly, I feel like my process for writing a pitch is like the microcosm of like you guys writing a book because I'll do like a terrible zero draft that's like no one will ever see it. Besides me. And then I'll like let it sit for like a few days or a week and then I'll come back to it and I'll be like, all right, this is too wordy. This is so bad. Like I'll make it snappier. I'll make it so there's a lot of like refining. And I feel like, again, that's like a microcosm of like what you guys are doing with actual manuscripts where you're like writing a draft and then you like set it aside and come back to it with fresh eyes. But usually it's like a process of that for like a couple weeks and then I get it there eventually.
Now I am curious, what got you into the literary world? Was it, did you love reading books? What made you want to become an agent?
I think we all love reading books is probably like where it started. My grandmother was a librarian, and so I have like all these really lovely memories of like sitting on her lap in her retirement home with her room that was like she had a room that was like just a library. Like there was nothing in there but books and like an armchair. And so I have a lot of fond memories of that. My dad was a really big reader too, so there were a lot of like readers in my family. And he would just let me like run loose in a library and bookstore and just like so I have yeah again so many great memories of that. So that's where it started. But when I graduated like high school and then university, I thought I wanted to be an editor. I think mainly because in like pop culture, like I feel like there's so many like movies and like you just hear of editors. I think I just thought that was the only job that there was like in publishing. And then coming from Southern California, where there's less publishing in Southern California, I went to grad school. And when I was at grad school, I took I went to like grad school for creative writing and book publishing specifically, and there was a agent named Fiona Kenshall, who's a agent at Transatlantic Agency, who used to work in the UK as an editor, and she was teaching a course on like agenting. And so that was, I think, my first like realization that there was this totally different job that included parts of editing because you do edit, but you're not like doing it all day, every day. And I loved that. Like I love the variety and like that every day is different. Um, I kind of thrive with like a challenge. And so, agenting is a sales job. And so I love the like risk reward of it all, like discovering things. So yeah, that was the first time I knew about agenting, but I always knew that I wanted to work in publishing. I just didn't know what that would look like.
Mhm. Well, walk us through a day in your life when you are agenting. Do you like, wake up early, only do queries in the morning, then do like full submission reads, or how does your day look?
Well, every morning when I wake up, my chocolate lab makes me take him to the park to play fetch. Uh, so I start every day literally going to the park down the street and playing fetch with my dog, which is nice to wake up. And I'm usually listening to like an audiobook while I'm there. But otherwise, like every day is really different. I work from home now. I used to work in the office. So some days I'm on marketing publicity calls with clients and their publishing team. Some days I'm offering, on a new client and we're discussing. Some days are email days, some days are editing days, so every day is really different. And I like that. Yeah, I like being able to set my own kind of schedule and I like being able to, because this is such a creative job, like I loved working in the office. And when I was a new agent and when I was an assistant, that was such a great crash course and so good for like mentorship and training. But now that I know what I'm doing, I'm more experienced. Like working from home, I have to say I'm probably more productive, you know? And it's nice to be able to go like take my dog for walks and just like think about books and like my clients' work and kind of be like in my head a little bit while I'm just on a walk with
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I am curious, what got you interested in Root Literary Agency? You mentioned going in and working as an assistant and then becoming an agent. What made you choose Root Literary?
yeah. I One of the reasons why I actually like applied to the job was purely because there are very few agencies in Southern California. And I was thinking about, do I go to New York? Because I had friends that I had met in grad school that were living in New York. And as we all know, that's very much like the hub for book publishing. And so I was kind of on the fence. And then part of like the why and the how of it was just like the stars aligning of the timing because Root Literary started in 2017. I think I graduated from my master's program in like 2015 and I moved back home. And so around the time that I was like, do I go to New York and you get my foot in the door there? I was working for a Southern California publishing house, but they weren't doing the kind of books that I wanted to work on. It was a lot of like nonfiction. Root Literary was hiring its first assistant and they had only been there a few years because Holly had moved from the East Coast like a couple. So it was kind of like a weird stars align moment where she had moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. They were looking for their first full-time assistant for their brand new agency. And then when I went to go look at the website, because actually one of my friends that I met in grad school had like a coffee meeting with Holly and found out that they were hiring. So some of this is like, who do you know, right? And she sent me the job posting. And then when I went to go look at the website, I was like, I recognize all of these books. They're like Root Literary does a lot of really commercial fiction. And so I was very familiar with all of their books. I had actually just been reading like Jasmine Guillory's romance books. I had just read like one of Victoria, I think it was Darker Shade of Magic. So it was just really wonderful to apply to a position where like I was like it's an all women company, like they really know their stuff. And so I was just really excited to work for like a small, female owned business and learn from people that are clearly like some of the best people in this industry. And so they really took me under their wing. And again, those first few years, it was me and Taylor Haggerty and Holly Root in a tiny office. And I just worked so closely with them. So I love the mentorship and the energy here.
Mhm. Well, now that social media is picked up in the book world, I am curious, like if you have any advice on the importance of social media for writers. I know Root Literary has a Instagram that I followed with
Yes.
love, but yeah, I was curious on the writers.
Yeah. It part of it depends on the market. I don't really work on a ton of nonfiction.
Okay.
So, but in nonfiction, it is very platform driven. That can be like a Substack. It doesn't have to be like an Instagram or a TikTok or whatever. But that is a very important thing. In fiction, I found that it's kind of like genre dependent because, for instance, right now, like romantasy is really popular, and that is a genre where having a platform of your own could actually be like really valuable to a publishing house because the readers of romantasy are prolific readers and they're very online. So like if you are in those spaces, like they will find you, right? That sounded threatening. Um, but yeah, that might be a good genre to have a good social media presence. But there's other spaces that it's less important. You know, again, I work with book club, with some literary leading authors, and I find that it's less important for those spaces. And ultimately, like, I don't need the authors I sign to have a large presence on social media. If they have one, great. Like it's an an advantage I'm sure we will use, but it's not necessary.
Mhm. Now, do you attend conferences, Melanie, where authors can chat with you? Any new events like that you have coming up?
I do. I think I have a virtual like pitch event with the James River conference, which I did attend a couple years ago in person as well. Um, so every once in a while, I went to like the Vancouver one a few years ago. So yeah, I'll go to maybe like one or two in person a year, depending on the year. And then every once in a while, do a virtual one. But I think I still feel like the best way to get an agent is like the old fashioned, like tried and true, like querying works. Like the majority of my clients I've signed through queries.
Have you ever signed one from a conference?
Yes,
Yes,
actually, I
okay.
have. Yeah, I have. Yeah, I went to the Mendocino Writers Conference years ago, and that one was actually a really nice one, in no part because Mendocino is just beautiful, and it was very relaxing and serene. But yeah, I met a client there.
Now, if you had to pick your favorite part of the literary world, what would it be?
Hmm, that is so hard. Favorite part? Well, honestly, it's super rewarding. Like I remember like I took like book publishing 101 in grad school, and that was like the very first course that all the students have to take. And I remember like day one, my professor being like, the thing about publishing is everybody is like very smart, very talented, like probably deeply underpaid. And like you, because of that, like you really need to you know respect. I mean, there's a lot of respect for the people. We're all very passionate about books, and so I think one of the things I love is just how much of us are in it for that love, right? And so it's really rewarding as an agent when you call your client and you're like, it's their debut book and you're like, we have an offer, right? And like that moment where they know, like even if they don't take that specific offer, that they are going to be published, like their book is going to be on shelves. It's yeah, there's a lot of like like, and also just like I love discovering stories. So whenever I like am in my query inbox and I'm like looking for something or I'm reading a full, I there's always this moment when I'm reading something and I'm like I sit up a little straighter because I'm like this like like that discovering that new voice is really fun. So it's a hard job, but there's a lot of rewarding stuff about it. Those are some of my favorite parts of the job.
Yeah. Now, before we take audience questions, can you share with us where people can find you on social media, your website?
Mhm.
I know you have a page on the wish list as
Yeah,
well.
I have it. There's like a few different places you can find me. I do have my own personal website, melaniefigueroa.com. I that links to my publisher's marketplace profile, which is where I tend to put like what I'm looking for. Again, I try to make that wish list, if you want to call it, not, it's not super specific. It's more like, here are the buckets that I'm looking for. Here are like some books that I love. That, like I'm not really trying to like get super like, I want a boarding school book or like, I just like, I want to be surprised. Like just send it to me if it falls in one of those buckets. I do have an Instagram page. I'm not on there a ton, but I do try to post, deal announcements and just talk about my clients' books. And every once in a while, I'll post like a picture of my dog or something. I've mentioned my dog a lot. I'm a dog person, if you couldn't tell.
You haven't told us their
Yeah,
name.
his name is Oakley.
All right, so a few audience questions we have, Melanie. The first one is going back to the query. What are your expectations for editing prior to querying? Do they need to hire a professional editor? Like, what's your recommendation? Like getting beta readers or?
hmm I am more pro like critique groups, workshop groups, like beta readers than I am hiring a developmental editor. I think, look, if you have the funds and the means, and that's like you're okay with making that investment, like no matter what happens with this project, like by all means, like that could be a really good crash course. But I just feel like the skills of the skill of developmental editing your own work is really crucial, and it's really important to develop that skill because when you sell your book to an acquiring editor, they're going to expect you to take it through sometimes multiple rounds of revisions, and they're going to expect that you're the one doing that work and that you're able to like read their editorial letter, take that feedback on board, incorporate it into your manuscript. And so if you're too reliant on working with someone who's kind of shepherding a project through that process with you, then I would worry that like you haven't strengthened those skills yet, right? So that's kind of again, I think depending on how you're approaching it, if you're like there are some authors who maybe they're not going through an MFA program or something like that, and if they have the financial means to hire an editor, maybe that's like they're treating it like their own like mini MFA program, right? So I think that can be effective, but by and large, I recommend like taking a book through multiple rounds of edits yourself before you query a project and that, do as much work as you can so that you give yourself the best shot.
Another question is how often do you sign new writers or new novels? Is there like a certain time you close or you don't want to take on any new clients because your list is full?
I like never close. Um, I think I have, what is it, FOMO, like fear of missing out. I'm like, but also just because I've like you never know when someone that's like the book that you've been looking for, a book that you're super excited about, like I don't know when that book is going to land in my inbox. And so and I'm still like, I'm far enough in my career where I know what I'm doing. I'm really confident, I'm experienced, like I feel like I've gotten my what is it, my feet wet kind of sort of thing. But I also have a lot of room to grow and like I'm still actively signing. So definitely looking for new clients still. There are parts of my list that I'm like maybe more in the moment actively building in, but yeah, still looking.
Mhm. And then another audience question was, can you define when you mention book club books? Like, is that the
Mhm.
Reese Witherspoon or ones you see like on GMA, or how do you define the book club?
Those are all actually great examples. Yeah, a lot
Okay.
of book club books do tend to be like, even if they have a really like hooky premise, they do tend to be like the kind of books that you're going to share with friends. And like there's going to be a lot of things for you to discuss and debate. They tend to be more character driven. They tend to have like deeper sort of themes woven into them versus like commercial fiction, which tends to be more for like entertainment, like romance, horror, like those kind of genres.
Mhm. And then another question is, are more literary books of interest right now? You mentioned you represent literary novels.
Yeah. Yeah, I love literary fiction. I read some of it. And I think books like I was thinking about Kevin Wilson is a great example of someone who writes speculative fiction that is more literary leaning. Or like Emily St. John Mandel, who writes, speculative books that are more literary. And so I'm a big fan of those authors. For me, I think the version of that I feel like I could really be valuable and know what to do with is something that does have maybe like that hooky high concept premise, but then the writing itself, like the execution, is more literary leaning. I think of literary more as like the way that you write versus like a genre, like it's like you can write like literary horror, literary sci-fi, like like it can fit within that genre, but it's more like the style of writing and how much you're focused on language and things like that versus again something on a more commercial end, which is more faster paced, very entertainment driven.
Yeah. And then another question was, do you promote your writers? And if so, how do you do that? You
Yeah.
mentioned like spending days doing publicity. So I guess like, how does that work?
Yeah, promotion is less my part of the job. However, I do sit in on like marketing publicity calls and look over like the plans that the publisher has because we do have a lot of authors we work with, many of which are spaces that we're already publishing into. And so I can look at a plan and kind of know like what levers we can pull, what things we should be asking for, because I've seen so many of these plans, right? And so I'm in those calls asking questions, and every plan is a little bit different, but I think it's just important to understand like why the publisher is making choices that they're making. Do they feel like that's a more effective strategy than this other thing, right? And then part of the reason why we have our own Instagram is actually like the agency does is because of like, not all of our authors are on social media. We can't control the publisher's social media and what they're posting or what they're not posting. And so while I don't have any ambitions that our Instagram is going to single-handedly make someone a bestseller, I do think it's a nice place to like give our authors some visibility and just celebrate their successes and like, every book that they have released. So that's part of why we have a little bit of a platform there.
Now talking about like self-publishing as well, if an author or a writer does self-publish, can they still like, there's some agencies where like if you self-publish, you can't do traditional publishing. Do you
Mhm.
merge both?
Yeah, we have a lot of successful indie authors on our list, more on the commercial space, which is what tends to work in self-publishing. So, like, we work with Ruby Dixon, Karina Hale, Rebecca Weatherspoon, um, Kate Golden. So, all of these are authors who either started off in indie, like self-publishing, or even still have a foot in that world while also having a traditional publishing line of business. So we're comfortable working with like hybrid authors. For us, it's just like a strategic question of like what feels more appropriate for self-publishing versus traditional publishing. And then for our clients that are self-publishing, we will sometimes do like the subsidiary rights sales for them. So we'll do like the audio book deal for them, or we'll do foreign and translation rights deal for them, while they kind of manage the actual ebook or print book.
Mhm. Another Laura asked, is it important to finish a book before querying agents?
Yes. I'm always like sometimes I hear people doing this. I think finish the book, not only finish the book, but edit the book before. I don't know if there are people out there who maybe are like testing the waters to see kind of the responses they get, but when I request something, I want to read it like, you know, pretty soon. Like I want to read it as soon as possible. So if the book's not finished, then, you're kind of that there's that gap between request and when you'd be able to share the book.
Yeah. And then Selena asked, you mentioned it being helpful to have a social media presence for romantasy. What if you're writing a romantasy, but you don't have a big social media presence? Will it be difficult to stand out to agents without one?
In the past, I would say it mattered less, but lately, more of the readers and those authors are there. So I don't think it's necessarily like, you shouldn't keep pursuing that line of business and that genre. But I think like the best time to start is now. So, if you can start kind of building an audience there and posting because a lot of being in this space is experimenting and seeing what works and what's getting attention. I do think like there have been times where I've submitted stuff in that space and the editors are like curious, like, does this person have a platform? So I would be hesitant to say like it doesn't matter at all. But I think, if you don't already have a presence there, again, the best time to start is now.
Mhm. Now, is there another genre where editors will be like, do they have a social media presence like rom-com or, other
All of
genres?
romance tends to be like, honestly, like again, it's not like the end all be all. Like
Yeah.
there are very variations of a romance. There's romance that does tend to be like more women's fiction leaning, which again is like, but the like trade romance that's like genre romance that there is a big audience on like those platforms like TikTok and Instagram. So romance is definitely like the big one that I think of, that platform being something that people ask for. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Colleen asked, is it okay to describe your manuscript as early YA for an age group 12 to 14? Or do you just say YA?
You could say early YA. Yeah, that wouldn't be a reason for me to like not consider it or anything. And there are imprints there that sometimes specialize in more like older YA or younger YA. So that could be useful information, even if that's not how I describe it when I send it out. That might just help for like targeting the right imprint and reader.
And one of the final audience questions is, do you have any advice for those interested in getting into agenting?
Ooh. Well, okay. So I wish I would have done more informational interviews. And I like personally, when most of the time, if someone, emails me and is like, hey, like I'm in university or I'm like interested in, getting into publishing, I'm considering being an agent. Like, could I grab like 30 minutes of your time whenever you like, it could be in the next month, whatever. I'm usually like amenable to that unless it's like a crazy time of year and I just like don't have time at all, because I respect the hustle. And I also just think like there's a lot of mystery around publishing and like how one becomes an agent. Every single agent I know has like a different path. Like no one has the same journey. And so I think if I were like starting now and trying to get in, I would probably be doing info interviews. I would like think about the books that you love. I would, you can look at the acknowledgments in those books. You can go to different agencies' websites and look for people who are working in the spaces that you would like to be in and try to find their email and ask for an info interview. You don't need to go to like I got my master's in publishing, but you don't need to do that to be an agent. There are lots of people who do not have master's degrees that are agents. Um, and then also if you, depending on like where you're at in your career, there are a lot of, internships and Writer's House has one of the most like reputable, I would say like well-known internship programs. And so, Writer's House might be a good one to keep an eye on when they're opening up for applications. And almost every agent starts off as someone's assistant because this is an apprenticeship field. You learn how to be an agent by working with a more senior experienced agent and helping them with their client list. And, that's how you get mentorship and training. Because again, there's just like no other way to learn how to do the job. Like you really, that's like the only way to do it. So yeah, start off as an assistant, look for internships, hit up people for info interviews. The worst that's going to happen is they're not going to respond to your email. Like, like it's worth like shooting your shot. So
Well, there you have it. Melanie, is there anything else you want to say before we conclude literary hour?
I would actually say that's that last question. The only thing I would add to that is like study the market the same way I was advising like a writer to study the market. Because the thing about being an agent is the second you make it your career and like not just your hobby or something you do for fun, is it really changes the way that you like look at the books on shelves. Like I would just walk through a bookstore, like look at like who, look at like the spine of the books that you like who actually published that book. Again, look at the acknowledgments. Think about like where they're sitting on a shelf, look at the back cover copy, look at how they're describing the books that are on shelves. Because again, it's just like the way that you look at books, it's really like marrying art and business. And as soon as you publish a book, it becomes a product instead of just this like thing that you're doing for fun or whatever. So yeah, and I think some of that is true for authors too. But if you want to be an agent, like you need to know how to talk about books in a way that intrigues people and gets them excited to read it. Because so much of the business is just like pitching and talking about your clients' books. So
Well, thank you so much for joining Literary Hour, Melanie, and thank you to everyone who attended and watching. I hope you all have a great day.
thank you all.